So welcome to the third session of the Austrian tunnel safety and security session. We are now going to the third presentation. Presenter will be Kees, and he will explain some thoughts about from innovation to regulation. So this is the important part to make things really happen, I would say, very critical for the impact of our knowledge that we gather. And so Kees, the floor is yours. Please introduce yourself and start with your presentation.
Yes, thank you, Max. So my name is Kees. I'm working for Promat, a supplier of passive fire protection, and the Etex group for some 10 years now, in the role of manager of standards and regulations. And before that, I've been active in TNO, Effectus in the Netherlands, and gained a lot of research experience on tunnel fire safety, especially in the scope of some large European research projects. They've been discussed throughout the conference. Especially working also with Max, our chair for today in this session, and many others present in the conference. So happy to see you all, and also some new faces digitally. That is that. My background is structural fire engineering with a master's and PhD degree from Delft University in the Netherlands. And that's it for the introduction. If you want to learn more, just drop me an email. Let's start with the presentation. So the picture actually shows a kind of an innovative idea in the form of a light bulb, but shot to pieces, if you like, by, restrictive regulations. And if anything, I hope a message that comes across as we give you some tools and intel to try and prevent just this. The presentation comes in threefold, so let's do a little bit of deep dive why this is actually a topic you should bother about. Then we'll do a bit of deep dive into the balance, if you like, to strike between standards and regulations on the one hand and innovation on the other hand. And then finally, a brief tour around the globe with some illustrative selection of developments in standards and regulations. Now let's have a closer look at the meaning of the words regulations and innovations. And let's start with regulations. Well, it's Latin to a degree, meaning regulare, so to control something by a rule, which is actually a straight piece of wood. So you have to go from one point to another in a straight line, and that's the regulation, and then it will bring you, say, forward. It's trying to capture, obviously, the experience in the past. And by definition, you could argue it excludes innovations. Now, let's look at the word innovation. It contains novus, new, and it sort of deviates from this straight line, this regula, that is the mainstream of thought. So they're actually a bit of a clash, if you like. So they have to be balanced. Now, let's put innovations first then, and not regulations. Let's put innovations first. And actually, over the last decades, I've been engaged in quite a lot of research. I've been happy to be engaged in that type of work. And I've seen many very innovative and very bright ideas, but not reaching the final stage, if you like. Out of the box thinking and just a selection here, not without any specific meaning, but just stuff that I found on internet and found in my drawer. Some water curtains with signature projected on it, so you can read what to do as a tunnel user and where to go to in the case of an incident and an evacuation. You need to find an exit, and there's clever guidance with that. And these innovations don't automatically reach it to a final stage of maturity and are implemented in regulations. And of course, many of these hit a solid brick wall, and the bulb then crashes. And all kinds of arguments are put in front of the innovators and these products. And some are, there is no data, there is no technical committee that can address and absorb the work that needs to do. Sometimes you may have luck that there is a standard and there is a technical committee, but you just missed the deadline and the window of a revision cycle that a standard needs to go to, and these topics can be introduced. And this is all bad luck. To a degree, bad luck, because if you know a little bit the rules of the game and learn to play with it, such things can be prevented. Now, some say, and the words of Jeremy Clarkson, if you invented the ship, you've also invented the shipwreck. And if you've invented the train, you've invented the derailment. And if you've invented the car, you have the traffic jams and whatnot. So this is the kind of argumentation. Also, there is some logic in it to a degree, but you have to put that aside and come with some evidence. Now, standards, actually, when you ask people what they think about standards, a lot of people automatically think a little bit of negative. They think about its restriction, it's a kind of ordinary, it's commodity, it's minimum quality. And actually, in Dutch, the preferred first meaning of the word standard is something that supports something else. So it helps the other topic or whatever, in this case, a phone. It helps to support that and do magical things with it. And of course, being in the Austrian section, I should mention Der Standard, which is a quality newspaper. Now, the evidence that I talked to you before about, the evidence to bring to the table, that's crucial. And of course, when you have some innovative product or service or approach, it has to go through some levels of growth and maturity. So it starts embryonic and it ends in a mature, well appreciated fashion in the marketplace. And there is a technological readiness level kind of approach. It's not my preferred sole way of looking at innovations, but it's very elegant. And it distinguishes 9 stages, if you like, 9 phases, starting with 1, when it's still basic principles and first thoughts, up to 9, where it's well appreciated in the marketplace. And in between, you need to gather data and you need to get buy-in from other stakeholders. And you need people to engage and funding research and getting data on the marketplace. And that's crucial. So stage 4, not without reason, almost central on this ladder, is testing in a lab environment. So there is consensus on how to test the product or service and bring it further up the ladder. Now, how does that work in a lab environment? How do you develop a standard? How do they come about? They don't magically appear. Something needs to happen before you can have such a standard and go to this lab environment where you test your product or service and move up the technological readiness level. Now, let's have a look at how CEN and ISO actually operate. There should be like a minimum of 5 countries that are interested in the topic in the first place. So if you need to find friends, there it already happens. You need to open up a little bit and gather people around you and countries actually that want to support this idea. Then you develop with experts, a limited group of experts, you develop a first approach, and that's called a committee draft in ISO and CEN language. And if you then further open up to other stakeholders and bring it open in the marketplace, you can bring about more consensus, and then sooner or later you can develop a standard output, deliverable that ISO declares it, a technological report or a technical specification. And if you even want to go a step further, which in a lot of cases needs to happen before the product or service can actually live on the marketplace, you develop an international standard. And you first publish it as a draft international standard, and you open it up for ballots so people can comment on it and add value, if you like, to such a standard. Now, in this kind of approach, there's obviously the first step that you actually contribute to write the document in the first place, to comment on it, and then finally to vote on it. Now, if with your innovations you enter in this very last stage, you've missed some boats, some stations, if you like, where you could really make sure that your innovation deserves a proper place. Balloting, also a brief anecdote here. Balloting on ISO level, every country has the same weight, but in Europe, the weight of the countries is in percentages. And what you see on the screen here, anecdotically, you perhaps would not have expected that Turkey is second in weight in Europe, just as a brief anecdote here. Now, you have to learn to move about in this arena of stakeholders that develop standards and regulations. In order to do that, I quickly want to illustrate how it works. I'll take please bear with me for a moment. please consider stakeholders to be plotted on a scale from left to right, from, say, official to more commercial, and from bottom to top, from technical more to political. Now, it's clear that in the top left, we have the European Commission and the European Parliament, and they have Directorate Generals, like, for example, DG Grow for the internal market and DG JRC. They are responsible for the Eurocodes. They mandate, for example, CEN, to produce these standards that we just talked about. And for example, TC 127 is in fire safety, and TC 250 works on the Eurocodes. Members of CEN are national mirror committees. There you go. You have to find these 5 countries, 5 mirror committees that want to work on these standards. And then further to the right, bottom right, you have trade associations like European Association for Passive Fire Protection and so forth. You have Construction Products Europe. Just because I'm in that scene, I know these trade associations, but there are many more. And there is even trade associations that work more on the political level. Now, all these work together in a specific way and work together to produce these standards. What you can see on this slide was actually a number of lines, and these lines indicate where you can amplify messages related to innovations, or where you can find objections and obstruction and people that will throw up these brick walls for this innovation. So you have to know how this works. Wrapping up this part of the talk, we've heard about these massive tunnel fire incidents at the end of the last century, beginning of this century, and that rocked the world to a degree. And the European Commission responded with some of these research projects that you've heard about, Upton, Darts, and whatnot. I've had the pleasure with, among others, Max, to work on these topics. Some lessons could be learned, though. One of the lessons is that some large-scale experiments, people hesitated to do that because it's also a confrontation, right? You throw in an innovation, you pull up funds for a large experiment, and then it can go completely wrong. Right? That's why you do an experiment in the first place. This hesitation was overcome, and it led to some beautiful things. It was also necessary to not only show the technical readiness level, but also the socioeconomic impact of a measure or not taking a measure. And what's key also was to bring the messages to a broader audience, so communicate with joint workshops. And this workshop is obviously a good example of it. Now, I want to wrap up with a brief tour, brief tour around the world. What I would like to do first is not to do a deep dive, because I'd like to refer to others to talk what PRC has done and what ITA COSEF has done on these topics. So if you want to know more, please contact Max or Shigeru Kikukawa from PRC. But let's first look to the other side of the pond, as the British say, so the other side of the ocean. The Americans actually have a very nice standard, NFPA 502, on tunnels and bridges. And as a result of the European projects, a lot of Europeans are active in this committee, from Austria, from the Netherlands, from Belgium, from Sweden, from Germany, and we try to influence please accept the positive meaning of the word here. We try to educate each and everyone with the findings that we had in Europe. And one of the findings is, which is also an innovation in itself, is brought by Effectis with a mobile furnace that helps you to experiment in an existing tunnel and to investigate the structural integrity. Besides NFPA, also ASTM has recently launched a standard to test the structural integrity. And wrapping up, the US, the Federal Highway Administration, has, beginning of this year, started with a massive investigation, starting first with literature survey on fixed firefighting systems. So this will certainly bring the US on another level as regards looking into tunnel fire safety. A little bit closer to home is ISO, and there has been a lot of discussion in ISO what to do with tunnels. ISO structure is not focused on buildings and structures, but more on fire safety sectors, if you like. So opening up a working group for tunnels was kind of innovative, if you like, and it helps to bring people around the globe together and talk about things that aren't yet harmonized or standardized, and could be a potential topic for investigation. And we're running an inquiry now. I'm lucky to be the chair of this working group. We're running an inquiry now across the globe to fish out which topics could be interesting to capture the innovation and to bring it into a standard situation. We're thinking about evacuation, commissioning, testing, studying backlayering, a topic that was also discussed in the previous presentation. Firefighting options, how to do that, especially with the new energy carriers, very important. Maybe we can talk about QRAs, although there's a lot of stuff there already done and dealt with on ITA and on PIARC level. Also in Europe now, Society of Fire Protection Engineers, we've investigated a lot on this topic, and we're seeing some barriers, and we want to ask people to come to us and check if and how we can reduce barriers for innovation. And I'm wrapping up now.
Please, Kees.
Yes?
2 minutes, please. Yeah.
2 minutes. Yes, thank you, Max. I'm wrapping up now. Also in Europe, we have the Eurocodes being revised at the moment and a performance-based design approach. And last but not least, in Europe, there's the Green Deal. And I'll skip this slide because I want to go to the Green Deal. The Green Deal is a big ambition in Europe, but my main message is there's a lot of interest on climate and renovation and circularity and whatnot. Fire safety is not self-evidently included, so we need to lobby for that. Also, the Green Deal talks about the Bauhaus, and also there we can argue that there's not a self-evident inclusion of tunnels in the Bauhaus, so we need to lobby for that. My 5 main messages here are future challenges and safety of tunnel constructions are there for us to make sure that innovation stays in place. Standardization does look forward, so we need to capture and learn how to play that game. Early stakeholder engagement is crucial, and there are a lot of opportunities there. And to finalize, we have to play standards like music and let innovation come alive. And it's a credit, I think, to the Austrian host of this session with the famous Mozart playing music. And that's how standards should also be played.
Okay, Kees, thanks a lot. Thank you very much for your inspiring presentation. We really like, especially conflict with the roots of the origin of innovation and regulation. Unfortunately, we have no more time for discussion, perhaps afterwards in the sessions to come. So it was my pleasure to have you here. We need to close the session. I hope to meet you again in the final session, in the final presentation of this session about electric vehicle fires and underground infrastructures. Kees, thanks a lot.
Yes, thank you, Max. Join us in round 4. Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.